Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at how DNS works. DNS stands for Domain Name Server. However, before I proceed into showing you the process involved in the URL resolution to IP, I would want to highlight to you the 6 basic steps that are important you familiarize yourself with. Now, basically, for a DNS name resolution server process, there are 6 steps. The first step involved here is when a DNS name resolution request is forwarded to a DNS server, the DNS server examines its local DNS cache for the IP address. Now, if the IP address is not in the DNS server's cache, it checks its host file. Now, usually, this host file is a static text file. However, it is not commonly used anyways. Now, the third step here is if the DNS server is not authoritative and configured for forwarding, the DNS server forwards the request to a higher level DNS server. However, if that is not the case, then the DNS server cannot forward the request. What it does is the DNS server uses its root hint files. Now, usually, these root hint files are listed within 13 root DNS servers. Now, the fifth step is the root DNS server responds with the address of the URL you are trying to go equal, either be a .com, a .edu, .net, .org, or what have you. Now, if this request is made, the last thing that happens on the sixth step is that the DNS server forwards the request to the high-end level server, which can respond with a variety of IP addresses. Now, I know this might sound a little bit confusing. However, I have a picture that I can use to depict the simple 6 processes that takes place during a domain name server resolution. Now, here we go. Now, you see there are 6 numbers, and these 6 numbers depicts the 6 processes I had earlier mentioned. However, in this case, this has been simplified to show the request from a user using a laptop towards the qosic.com. So the first thing that happens is the user request for the IP address for www.qosic.com. So basically what this means is when you type qosic.com, you don't know the IP, and for simplicity, people don't want to remember the IP addresses of all the sites they go to. So this request is forwarded to the first DNS server shown in number 2. Now, when it checks its record and finds out that it doesn't have the domain in its cache, what it does is it forwards the query to another server. And in this case, it's shown in number 3. So what it does is it checks its cache, and if for some reason it has, like in this case, it has the domain record IP, which is 46.30.213.115, it responds back to the DNS server of number 2 saying that yes, I have this. Here is the IP for qosic.com. And what the DNS server in number 2 does is it stores the response from DNS server in number 3 in its cache for subsequent usage from other users. Now, it sends back a response to the user saying that this is the IP of the request you've made. Now, the user in number 5 says, thanks for the IP address. Let me establish a connection to the server now. Now, this is very basic. You send a request, you get a resolution, and then you have your web page opened. Usually, these steps might seem long, but in reality, it takes milliseconds for this to be completed. In fact, usually if you have a fast internet connectivity, it takes less than milliseconds. So in the next slide, I will show you these basic 6 steps again, but in a simplified way. So but what you see here is you type in a website called the qosic.com into a browser. It is expected that your phone, computer, tablet is already connected to the web. Therefore, it sends the domain name www.qosic.com to the DNS server. Now, it sends it in that format with an A record. So the DNS server resolves the website URL and sends back to you the IP address. This usually takes some milliseconds, like I already said, in a blink of an eye. and then it responds back with this IP. Yeah, you are now connected. And what it means basically is if you visit these sites over and over again, you might not need to go through all this process because it has been cached. I hope you do enjoy this video, and thank you for watching, and kindly subscribe for your subsequent techie videos. You can also reach me on the email address as shown. Thank you.